Welcome to the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randall and Gus Kearns.
Welcome in, listeners, to the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops. You could have been anywhere else on the dial, but you chose to be here with us, Mike and Gus. We appreciate that. Listeners, we're trying to get you ready for the college basketball season and well underway, 5-6 games in deep. Congratulations. You have a bonus podcast from the Screener College Basketball Podcast this week to kind of ride you through the weekend and get you to next week, to the Thanksgiving season. We brought in Ellie Lieberman, a contributor for Mid-Major Madness. Please give her a follow at ELLIELIEBS, Ellie Liebs. You can find her stuff at Mid-Major Madness and at Sports Nation. So please give those two places a follow for her, of course, and follow her Twitter feed. That'd be great. Ellie and I talked about a number of different things. We talked about Michigan State, Seton Hall. We talked about James Wiseman in Memphis. We talked about Sabrina Ionescu, Oregon. Maybe she's just the best player in the nation, that men's or women's. We talked about a couple of mid-major players that we really love, a couple of familiar faces there. We talked some quick hitters and some quick results from the mid-major level, so please make sure you listen to that. And then we also talked about a couple of teams that we might want to pay attention to moving forward, moving towards March. If you really like what you're listening to here on the Screener College Basketball Podcast, please don't be afraid. Go to your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. We maraud for ears here. And please leave a nice review. Leave a nice review, 5 stars or whatever the rating may be. Say nice things about Ellie. Say nice things about our guests. Say nice things about Rob Doster. Say nice things about Reegs from Barstool. Say nice things about Matt Norlander. Say nice things about Eric Fawcett. Say nice things about all the cool guests that we've had to come on. And say nice things about Mike as well. Don't forget to give him a follow over at Randall Rant for all things college basketball and fantasy football. Lastly, please don't forget to give the podcast a follow at SDS Podcast. Efficiency of keystrokes, of course, when you're dialing that in. Please enjoy the conversation with Ellie. We'll catch up with you before you know it, and we hope that you guys have a great weekend. Cheers, cilantro, gratulati out there. All right, listeners, welcome into the Screener College Basketball Podcast. We're always talking everything college hoops, and we got a special guest. We have Ellie Lieberman, a contributor from Mid-Major Madness. She is also a current student at Washington University in St. Louis, so she has a little insight there for us as well. She's also worked with Bradley Beal's elite AAU team and has some experience with a couple of players that you might to get to know. So, Ellie, thanks for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Gus. It's definitely nice to be here.
Please provide the listeners a couple of other locations and platforms where they can discover your work. What do you think?
Definitely my Twitter handle is Ellie Liebs. So I'm kind of, when I'm not in the college kind of grinding away, doing stuff I need to do there, I definitely write for SB Nation and Mid-Major Madness. So check out those two platforms when you get a chance.
Excellent. Okay. All right, Ellie, let's start with some upsets. I think we got to start with Kentucky. They lost to Evansville. They're in a puddle of trouble here. And then they looked very ordinary against Utah State. So where are you at with Kentucky? Do you feel like they are an elite team? Do you feel like maybe we're overrating them? Where are you with your eyes as far as Kentucky goes after viewing the last 2 games that they played at home?
So I think Kentucky's probably the Wildcats are playing in typical Kentucky fashion. I think that they generally struggle at the beginning of the year just because they rely so heavily on younger players. So I think that, we have to see the 2 guys with experience, which is Nick Richards. We have to see Ashton Hagans. We have to see them kind of pick up their pace. I didn't think that they would lose against Evansville, I would say. But I think that's the type of gritty team that hopefully will take the Wildcats down to the wire in March Madness. So I think that what could be concerning, though, is seeing how they do on the road. So I think that they've had pretty favorable matchups so far. So we'll see how the talent comes together. Obviously, they have a big mid-major transfer as well in Nate Sestina, who I'm quite fond of from Bucknell. So I think that he will hopefully provide some experience there. I'm not too worried about the Wildcats. I think they'll figure it out, but it's always fun to see an upset here or there.
And that's exactly what we hope for as like college basketball fans. We hope that like the big team gets upset, and that's exactly what happens. So as much as everybody's going to like go into panic mode, I think everybody's going to go into like mini celebration mode and be like, okay, but the season is in a little bit disarray here, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I think it's that weird step of the season where you definitely see some odd non-conference losses. Then Kentucky will kind of be the big blue machine in conference play, and then hopefully we'll see them lose to maybe another smaller team during March Madness.
All right, well, we'll have to find out and play some bets on that if that happens. Yeah. Give us what your eyes saw with Michigan State and Seton Hall. The matchup was just kind of awesome. It's everything that's wonderful about college basketball. We had All-America guards that just went head-to-head with Powell and Winston, and both of them playing with like some uncertainty. You know, Winston on his end playing with a little grief, Powell on his end playing with a little injury. 2 top 20 teams just going head-to-head. We were so pleased to have such a high level in our home state of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. What'd you think? What did your eyes tell you with each one of these teams, and maybe each one of these guards playing with an uncomfortable fashion, Powell and Winston? What'd you take away from that particular matchup? And then their follow-up games where they both followed up with wins.
So I definitely think that, you know, that was one of those games that you live for. It really seems like it's March Madness material. Just a complete dogfight. I was looking at the highlights the other day, and it's every possession back and forth. And so I think that I'm pretty high on both teams. I think, as you pointed out earlier, seeing Cassius Winston deal with such heartbreaking circumstances in his daily life, seeing him kind of show the grit to perform, that was pretty special. Hopefully, I guess being a mid-major fan, that Michigan State will choke eventually in March Madness, but they looked really solid. They did look really solid on the road. I think on the flip side, in terms of your home state team, I do think that Seton Hall also has, as far as what we've seen, they totally have the caliber for a deep run in March Madness. I am quite optimistic as well about your team, specifically Miles Powell. I think he's not really being considered as a player of the year candidate, but I don't see why not. I know that Seton Hall, they only made 66% of free throws. Also, Michigan State shot pretty well from behind the arc. So I think that once Seton Hall puts it together, they really could make a deep run as well.
My partner, my co-host, Mike Randall, is a little bit hesitant on going all in with Seton Hall. So I was intrigued to hear your view on Seton Hall. If you felt like they were legit, if you felt like they were like a legit top 20, top 15 team. So I was really intrigued there because that game really spoke volumes about both teams, Michigan State and Seton Hall. All right, Ellie, you knew we were going to go. What do you think about James Wiseman in Memphis? Just what in the world do you make of the whole situation now that he's suspended for 12 games? Where are you at with student athletes getting paid in college? The NCAA said they would do. SB 206. This should not be an issue. Ellie, where are you with the whole situation as far as college student athletes getting paid, and where are you at with Memphis and James Wiseman?
Yeah, so for me, the James Wiseman situation all the way around, it's really disappointing to hear. I know that there was an update today that actually said that he even had to give money to charity. I think it was $10,000 or $11,000. I think that, you know, the NCAA profiting off the backs of a majority, like low-income college athletics, players in general. I think it's a pretty bad situation. I think that it's also specifically corrupt, just kind of if you think about the fact that there are players in football, especially white privileged players like Jake Fromm, who are able to participate in different activities thanks to the University of Georgia. And Wiseman's really only being suspended because Penny Hardaway helped him out. So I think that there's a lot of corruption, sadly. I'm hoping that these bills start to become the norm in most states, and then eventually the NCAA will be forced to do something about it. At the very least, players should be able to benefit off their own name and likeness, I think, though.
I think that's exactly where our heads are at. Like, if you can negotiate that value for just showing up at a venue, then you should be able to get that value. Likeness recommends, and it shouldn't be a situation. It shouldn't be anything that like takes away from your amateur status. Anything that takes away from your potential to participate in college athletics. It seems very silly. It seems like you have it kind of on lockdown there. I think that seems very, very rock steady. All right, Ellie, the father of a baller daughter who is the point guard in all boys league. We need to talk to Sabrina Ionescu from Oregon. She came back for her senior. She's already putting up like lotto type numbers. Is she the best player in women's college basketball? And can we make a case for her to be the best player in college basketball, period, end of sentence? Ellie, where do you stand with Sabrina?
Yeah, so I think it's great, first of all, that you're mentioning her. We definitely see that women's college basketball gets swept under the rug a lot. And I personally I think you're spot on in saying that she could make the case to be the best college basketball player, man or woman this year. It's interesting. She was actually working out in the Bay Area this summer with the trainer I was working with. I missed her. I wasn't there, but I saw some videos and she could just light it up. She's the type of person who you just see her and you think that she just could be the ultimate, one of the best players ever. I think that what sets her apart is, well, the fact that Oregon beat the U.S. women's team. That hasn't been done in 20 years. And I cannot overstate that is such a big accomplishment. I think that what also sets her apart is just she's one of those players who it might not show up in the stats, but she's so balanced. Like one game she'll lead the way with assists. One day she'll lead it with points. She does whatever the Ducks need. Even I think that her scoring per game this year is actually down. I'd be shocked if Oregon didn't make it to the Final Four just because she's one of the best players in this generation, I think, in women's basketball.
Listen, if you're going to say she's one of the best players of this generation, then we are talking about the best player in college basketball currently. I'm totally with you. My daughter and I are huge fans of Sabrina. I think she's amazing. We're so glad she came back for her senior year. All right, so speaking of impactful players, Ellie, who on the men's side will transfer back over there has caught your eye during the first 5 games or so? Give the listeners, maybe 1 or 2 players who you think really might continue their early season success that have surprised during the season. I mean, besides the guy that we really love Shabuti from Long. Besides Shabuti, who else is really?
Yeah. So I know you guys have also been quite keen on Anthony Lamb, but I won't mention him because I think that you already know, and it was evidenced by his performance against Virginia that he can score most. He can score honestly more than most of Virginia's opponents can, and so I think that I would love to see that team in March at some point. I would say, on the other hand, I'm a big fan of Sam Merrill, who is on Utah State. And so they're ranked right now. And they have a pretty strong non-conference schedule. He right now is averaging 17.4 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, and a little bit over 4 assists per game, and shooting over 50% from 3. I think that they're 5-0. I think that he has so much potential. He is kind of in the player of the year conversation. And I think until we see them really struggling or losing, that he deserves to be there. And then I'd say one other player is that I think he specifically is flying a lot more under the radar is Jordan Rowland, who's at Northeastern. And so, he's it's not going to be something he keeps up, I'm sure. But right now he's averaging 30 points per game, hitting over 63% of shots from behind 3. It's a great story, I think, just because he was initially a bench warmer at George Washington. And to see him now start at Northeastern, he's a senior, hopefully could kind of take control of CAA play. It's a very exciting storyline that I think people should be following. We
love Anthony Lamb. We've been on him for a while. And when he lit up and almost outscored both JMU and Syracuse against UVA, the most stout defensive team in the nation, we're totally on board with Anthony Lamb. You're not alone with Sam Merrill. We had Matt Norlander on the podcast talking about Merrill. So you're in good company there. And as far as Jordan Rowland, I was the crazy person that picked Harvard to maybe go to the Final Four. And guess what? Jordan Rowland lit Harvard up for 42. So I'm totally on board with that. Yeah. I'm a Jordan Rowland fan from here on out. Has my full attention. All right, Ellie, let's go with some quick hitters. Let's go with some quick takeaways from what you think might have happened or what you saw or what your mid-major eyes might have told us. Quick takeaway from UVA, Vermont. We know Lamb. You just mentioned Lamb. He's one of the best players in the nation, right? Hands down, end of discussion. What did you take away from the game? Do you think Do you think UVA is in any trouble, or do you think Vermont is that?
I'm going to say that Vermont is that good. Being a college student, I always struggle. I'm using some illegal platforms to find my games. It's kind of difficult. So I actually tweeted about that. I was having ACC Network was blocked out. So I had to resort to some other options to watch that game, but I knew that it was going to be close, but I really didn't even think it was going to be that close. Anthony Lamb, I think, is unstoppable. I think, they're a force to be reckoned with in the American East. I think John Becker is a great coach. Simply, Vermont has been underrated for a while, and I think it's surprising that we haven't seen a win from them in the last 5 years or so in the tournament, because everything seems to line up for them. So I think that Virginia will be just fine, but I think Vermont is that good. If you're a Catamount fan, do not lose your hope. I think they will. All the teams I've mentioned, I really am keen on them, and I hope that they have a good run this year.
I think UMBC kind of stole their win, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that sense in some strange way against UVA. So I think it makes sense that Vermont actually showed out really well against them. I am not afraid to say they probably shared some game notes in conference to say hey, you might want to do this against UVA because we defeated them in the 116 game, so on and so on. All right, Ellie, just how good is Liberty? They're impressive on both ends of the floor. They got their win last year in the NCAA tournament. What did you take away from Liberty on both the defensive end and the offensive end? Do they have enough back to make enough noise in March? What do you think?
So I hadn't even noticed, really had been following Liberty at all until you sort of tipped me off on that. But you're right. They're fifth in the nation right now defensively. I think that's a huge accomplishment in its own right. I don't know that I'm convinced they'll even make it to March. I think that they haven't faced a big challenge yet. They will be playing Grand Canyon, LSU, Vanderbilt. So if they can win one of those games away, I think that's a huge testament to what they're returning some key scorers, Darius McGehee and Scotty James. So I think that's good. I'm not confident enough yet to say that I think they will be one of the best mid-major teams.
Interesting. Okay. I think I'm a little bit more in than you are, Ellie. I think I'm bought in on the defensive end, if nothing else. I know that they may not have the weapons offensively they had last year, but I think on the defensive end, I think they're locked in. They've been defending people like crazy. So I think I'm a little bit more bought in than you. I think that LSU game is going to be a little fishy. I think that's worth paying attention to if you are a college basketball bettor. Delaware. The Blue Hens, just how good are the Blue Hens this year? Is this Delaware team for real? Is Nate Darling going bananas?
Mm-hmm.
Some players. Yeah. Nate Darling is balling out big time. They're 5-0, 6-0. Are the Blue Hens for real? Is this should they be a threat in the CAA?
I think that this is going to make for some really, really exciting CAA games. I mean, I didn't know much about Nate Darling before, but you're right. He's completely on a rampage this year. I think that he seems to be honestly one of the most prolific scorers in all of college basketball right now. But what I do worry about for him is that, again, it's the competition aspect, but he has been turning over the ball more than he had any other season. Right now, has a career high 3.4 turnovers per game. So for them, it's the competition thing. If he can polish his skills there, then they should be good. But I'm not sold either on them.
All right. So I'm not sold really on them either, but I'm just intrigued more than anything. And we'll stick inside the CAA. William & Mary is playing, and they're playing big with multiple post players over 6'10". Nathan Knight is an NBA-ish guy, and the Tribe is on. I'm going to ask you, is the Tribe onto something with playing multiple bigs similar to UNC and Gonzaga in recent history? Or is this something that's going to have find its shelf life and be done with? Where are you at with William & Mary? Do you think that this succeed in the CAA? Them and Delaware are going to totally evaporate to the back end like they usually do? Or does William & Mary and the Tribe have something going here with multiple bigs?
I think that William & Mary definitely has something going for them. I think they've kind of been on the verge of something in the past few years, just not able to sneak forward all the way. I think that Nathan Knight, he is an NBA guy just with his figure. And I was going to say him together with Andy Van Vliet, they kind of remind me of, some of the Tennessee teams you've seen in the past with Admiral Schofield and Grant Williams. You just have these two guys who can really shoot and score from all three levels, but they're dominant bigs. And so I think that they could really be a threat here. Again, Nathan Knight, you're right, he is an NBA guy. So I think that with them, I would expect to see them finishing strong in season play as well.
You know what? That would be nice to see the Tribe, because they've been on, I feel like they've been knocking on the door, just like you said, forever. And then let's end with one more quick hitter with mid-majors, Ellie. Let's end with Belmont. They've been like awesome, like completely in bananas. Can you please tell the listeners like why they've been so awesome? Please tell the listeners one reason why Belmont has still been awesome, even though Rick Byrd decided to retire and they don't have their trusted head coach on the sidelines anymore. What has made Belmont and the Bruins like unbelievable this year so far?
I think that for Belmont, it's always no matter what year, no matter what coach, there's something about the culture there where they always have one prolific scorer who just gets the job done. I mean, I didn't know that they were going to have a guy for that this year, but Adam Kunkel is really kind of shooting the lights out. And so I think they've always been that team that can build around one guard. And so it's more a culture thing. And it looks like if Kunkel might be able to fit that mold, and then we'll see some success for them this year.
I think he totally fits that role. That, look, if they're going to have Mazinski in the middle and they're going to have Murphy running the point, like if they have somebody shooting threes from the perimeter that like Kunkel, that makes perfect sense. And I think that absolutely fits into like what the Belmont offensive profile is going to be. All right, Ellie, with a few upsets and a few surprising results, ranked teams are taking losses on like it's a habit. What do you feel like might be some of the secret sustainable successes for this season? Maybe some teams might hold. Did your college basketball eyes find a high major team or two that hold a special balance and build on the small sample size that we've seen so far in this early season? Like, what are a couple of high major teams that you feel like, maybe we're underselling these high major teams and they might make a run, or they're a little bit undervalued so far in the early season?
I think I'll mention some more, smaller schools in a second, but I do think that, as I kind of mentioned a little bit, Utah State, I don't know if that actually counts, ambiguous what actually is a mid-major these days, but they are number 15 in the country. As I said, I think it's Sam Merrill. I think it's the atmosphere there. It seems like an awesome place to watch a game going down to Utah State. And I think they've faced the competition, and they're a team that it seems like this might be the perfect year for them to excel, just because we heard about them last year. Now the players have another year under their belt, and it seems like they have been rising to the occasion so far against quality teams. So Utah State, for sure.
You are not alone when we've talked to all of our preseason prognosticators that have mentioned Utah State as the team that might surprise and maybe be a little bit underrated or undervalued. So you're in good company there, Ellie. Nice work. Let's work over to your mid-major madness. Let's provide the listeners with something they can be really smart about, right? Let's give them something that they can be really intelligent about. Give the listeners one or two teams that you and your mid-major crew have been like kind of keying in on, and maybe we haven't talked about on our podcast, they haven't talked about on their podcast, that we can sound really smart about on the mid-major level, that we think might make some noise, whether it be during the regular season or during March. So maybe give one or two teams, besides Utah State, that might make some noise or at least move the needle a little bit on the mid-major level.
For my first team, I'm going to have to go with Evansville. I know that's not surprising to you guys, but I do want to emphasize the fact that winning against that Kentucky team in Lexington, that is not an easy task at all. I know they did end up losing to SMU by, I think, 1 or 2. That puts a little dent in the armor, but I think that they have this high-powered guard combination. It's DeAndre Williams and KJ Riley. I think that they have the potential there. The coaching, obviously, too. I mean, they have someone who's a pro's pro. And so I think that this won't be the last that we hear of them. And then second of all, I'm a big A-10 fan. I think that one team that has that same seasoning with the guards, they actually haven't been off to a great start. They're 2-2. They have played some tough teams. I'm going to have to go with Davidson. I think that Bob McKillop, you can never bet against that man. And I think that with John Axel Gudmundsson, that's a tongue twister, Kellen McGrady, I think that team is hungry. They have experience. A lot of dominoes line up for them. So we'll see how they do in A-10 play.
My partner, my co-host, Mike Randall, will be right on board with you with the Davidson pick. So you are in good company there for sure. I'd take Evansville after they take over Kentucky. I think nobody's going to argue with you there. All right, Ellie, let's look ahead a little bit. Let's look into the future. We'll look into the crystal ball or look into your palm and do some palm reading. And let's look to the holiday-ish tournaments. Is there one that you're locked into, one that you can't wait to watch, one that you can't get your mind wrapped around because of all the teams that are in there? What tournament are you going to have your eyes on, Ellie, that you're really going to be paying attention to moving forward to during the holiday season?
I'm usually tend not to be one to buy so much into these tournaments because they're happening in the Bahamas, Hawaii, wherever. It's hard to know who's actually playing their best and putting it all out there. So I'm not sure that there's specifically a tournament that I'm sort of, Battle for Atlantis, I guess, is always fun. But there's one game in particular. I think that VCU is going to be playing Purdue. I think it's something like the Emerald Coast Classic. I think that'll be a fun matchup. Purdue, they've just kind of, again, been a machine the past few years. I think even without Carson Edwards, I think they'll still be tough. And then VCU, again, it seems that it's funny, VCU beats LSU and it's all the old coaches leave, but something stays. And I think that they could win and they could go far in that tournament as well.
When we talked to Brian Mull from the Blue Ribbon, he said that VCU was his team that he looked forward to watching overall for the whole season. Not even as a mid-major. He just said VCU is going to be dangerous the whole entire year. If you're going to be in with our guy Brian Mull as far as VCU, we're in with that. Then we talked to Matt Norlander. He said one of the things that one of the things that you have to pay attention to is these teams that always get it right. And one of the teams that always gets it right is Purdue. So you're right in one of those games that we need to key in on. All right, Ellie, let's get you out of here on a Kraft 4-pack. Let's give you 4 cool, quick questions and really get the listeners get to know you. Travels, Ellie, is there a game that you're looking forward to road tripping to or seeing in person this season? Anytime this season, what are you looking forward to?
So it's obviously hard, with the schedule of a college student with finals, but I'm actually really lucky in that SLU is right around the corner. And so I do know for a fact we've mentioned one of these teams. I will be seeing SLU play Belmont next week, which I think is going to be a really good matchup. SLU's been doing really well with recruiting here in the St. Louis area. And obviously they performed well last year, but I do think Belmont is one of the best teams to come in here. So we'll see if Kunkel can keep his hot streak going against SLU. I honestly think that one's going to be a toss-up in terms of who wins, but I'm excited for it.
Listen, if you're going to see that one in person, that's going to be the complete dichotomy in styles. We've seen St. Louis defend at a super high level last year. And we've seen Belmont operate at an unbelievable level on the offensive level, on the offensive side of the ball. If we're going to look at contrasting styles, that is the game to look forward to. If you could trade, Ellie, a team into your preseason Final Four with the knowledge that you own now, where you're I was thinking about these 4 teams for my Final Four preseason. What's the one team that now you would want to put into your Final Four and be oh yeah, this team is going to make it. This team is going to do it. What is the team that has really impressed you and really knocked your socks off for this preseason?
I think that this year it's different than last year or some of the past few years where it seems that there's a team that's already so cohesive, like the UVA of the past or even Duke with, one superstar like Zion. I don't necessarily see that. Obviously, Cole Anthony, UNC, it's looking good for them. But I would say in terms of a team that I would say is almost a lock pick, I'm going to kind of go out on a whim here, but I do think that there will be a Big Ten team in the Final Four. I think that obviously Michigan State with Cassius Winston, they've put it together a lot faster than I thought that they would. So I think that that's a contender, though. I always do think that the Spartans find a way to lose earlier than they're supposed to in March Madness. So I'm not completely set on that. Another team to look out for making a deep run. I think this, people might place them more as an Elite 8 or Sweet 16 team right now, but I think they have a lot of good pieces too, is Ohio State. I think that
nice.
Yeah. They have, I'm a huge proponent. I think that DJ Carton is one of the best young point guards in the game. I've heard about him from some NBA players where I was working this summer, and he seems like a player who is ready to go to the pros. Again, it's Chris Holtman. He's gritty. I think he can put together a good team. So this might be the year that we see them break through.
I was one of the proponents of Ohio State. Preseason, podcasts, I picked them to go to the Final Four. So I'm totally on board with the Buckeyes. That's awesome, Ellie. You get you out of here on two good ones. Tunes. What's on the playlist? What's in the headphones while you're working over at Mid-Major Madness and you're working on your finals? Give the listeners something that they should probably put their ears on besides college basketball or a great podcast like this one.
Yeah, so obviously podcasts come first, but I think that if you're not listening to this, I think that it's a little late because this might even be too mainstream for some listeners. I'm a big Post Malone fan. I think that his album, Hollywood's Bleeding, has a little bit of everything. If, into rap, obviously you got that, but he's quite a good vocalist too. And so that's an album that recently I've just been listening to on repeat. And I think he has some good collaborations there. So definitely check that out.
Nice. My older daughter, who's in middle school, has mentioned Post Malone. So I feel like I'm kind of cool that I can throw that back out there at you. Okay, cool. And last thing, Ellie. All right. What hits the taste buds? Where's the better beer? Is it out west where you're from? Is it in St. Louis where you are currently? What do you think? Where are the better tastes at? Give the listeners what do you think your opinion?
Obviously, being under 21, I'm not going to disclose details on necessarily where, because it's
fair answer. Very good answer.
But yeah, it's unlike a college student to have no idea in this realm. So I'll go out on a limb and say that it's hard to compete with what St. Louis has. You got the Clydesdales, you got Budweiser, you got Schlafly, a lot of smaller brewers too. I think that St. Louis is a fun place to come for sports, and obviously that too.
That sounds fantastic. All right, listeners, what else do you want from a college basketball podcast? You got everything you want there. You got high majors. You got Ellie telling you about mid-major players. You got her telling you about what team you think is going to make the Final Four, and Post Malone as well. Listen, say thank you, Ellie, for joining the podcast. Cheers, cilantro, gratulazia, everybody. Ellie, anything else you'd like to add to listeners out there?
Just want to say thank you so much, Gus, for having me on. I'm excited to see what you guys do the rest of the season. Obviously, there's no off season for you, so you've been off to a great start.
All right, cool. Thanks, Ellie. We appreciate you giving us a little time and giving us a little insight on the mid-major level. Listeners, if you like what you're listening to, please don't be afraid. Give the podcast a nice follow on your podcast consumption vehicle of choice. Throw some 5 stars out there and say nice things about guests like Ellie. And we'll give you a little bit more as the season goes on. Ellie, please enjoy the weekend hoops, and we'll catch up with you before you know it.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cheers.
I'm addicted to the appetite.